Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Bryant. I'm the Business Development Manager here in Southwest Florida. If you're not aware of Castle Group, we are a full-service, full-time on-site property management company. So if you're in need of any management services, please feel free to reach out to myself or Shauna Fleischbein, my counterpart up in Sarasota, Tampa area. So Shauna, I'll pass it on to you.
Right. Hi, everybody. As Laura said, I cover the greater Tampa, Sarasota market for Castle Group, and we're here to assist with any of your association needs. And today we're joined by Sharif and Daryl from Clark. They've joined us in the past. We try to do this like once a year because we live in Florida, and we are like probably about the capital, I would say. Maybe not officially, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were, of mosquitoes, especially this time of year. So it's always great to have a refresher on, what's out there, what we're dealing with, what we're seeing this year, and, how we can help like remedy it. So I'm going to hand it off to Sharif and Daryl to introduce themselves and take us along for this informational journey today.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm Sharif Jackson. I'm the Central Florida consultant for Clark. So I have from about Nassau County down to St. Lucie and almost everything in between, Orange, Polk, Osceola, all the good stuff. I say I have the fun part of Florida. So, and then my counterpart, Daryl, can introduce himself.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Daryl Bajati with Clark. I'm the South Florida Control Consultant. So if you look at the state of Florida and you see Lake Okeechobee there, draw a line from the East Coast to West Coast directly across it, and I'm servicing everything south of that. Been with the company for over a decade now, and really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today.
All righty then, without further ado, I'm going to move into the presentation. At the end, we'd like to do a little Kahoot quiz. So if, I don't know if you ever played that before, you get to answer questions from your computer or phone or whatever you're on, and then we send out a gift card. So if you are on your computer and you can get to the Kahoot, then at the end, we'll do a quick 10 question quiz. So for those not familiar with Clark, we are a public health and product services company. We've been around for over 75 years now, and our purpose is to make communities more livable, safe, and comfortable. We have an office in Kissimmee, in Wellington, and LaBelle, and then we have several offices in Illinois, but we also service another number of counties that are not in those areas for emergency services and things like that. So we're all over the country and then also all over the world. I mentioned our mission, and this just shows our vision and values. We are really big on caring for the planet. We wanted to kill the mosquitoes and not the earth. So we have a number of services and products that include OMRI listed products and more soft chemistries and like electric machines instead of gas powered machines. So we do a lot to be softer on our imprint on the earth while killing mosquitoes. You've met myself and Daryl. Kel Payne is the other member of the Florida team, and he has the west coast of Florida, so he's going up all the way into the Panhandle. Our customers on the product and equipment side are usually abatement districts and counties and other municipalities, but on the service side, we usually deal with property and community managers, HOA, CDDs, and then on the commercial side, we do resorts and golf courses and things like that. So what are we here to talk about today? What I say, the unofficial state bird of Florida. There are more mosquitoes here than most places in the rest of our country, but then also midges too. And I realize everybody is not necessarily familiar with midges. So that'll be a little bit different for some of you. And we're going to talk about how mosquitoes led to the development of Florida and teach you some of the biology and behaviors of mosquitoes and how it pertains to your profession. So why are we talking about this today? As you see this picture, we know that they will pick up and put a neighborhood right in the middle of a swamp because, I mean, that's most of what Florida was. And so what you're seeing here is the perfect example of how you put a beautiful community right in the middle of a swamp and then, oh no, you're getting complaints about mosquitoes. We are moving where mosquitoes live and they are not going anywhere. Florida is a wonderful place to live. I mean, there's just a few things to kind of get on your bad side, like bears and gators and mosquitoes and hurricanes and things like that. But otherwise, Florida's a perfect place to live. And unfortunately, when people are buying their homes, they don't tell them, oh yes, this was a swamp before we put this neighborhood here. So you're probably getting calls about that. So why are we talking about today? So remember this picture, because later on I'm going to talk about all the breeding places for mosquitoes. And so you're going to think back, wow, in this one community, how many different places could mosquitoes be breeding? And so that's something to keep in mind when you're starting to get those complaints, and you need to give those tips to residents about what they can do to keep from breeding them in their own backyard. So like I said, in some of these new developments, you're plopping them right down right in the middle of a swamp, or you're keeping things like retention and detention ponds and just little spaces where they kept the natural woodlands that were there before the neighborhood was there. But when you preserve that, you preserve everything that was living there first. So if there were gators, they're still there. If there were snakes, they're still there. If there were mosquitoes, they're still there. And so, while we do want to preserve as much as we can of the natural lands, that's just the fact that you're going to have to deal with some of those things. And so it's important that we don't lose that fact. And this map is just a idea of how we kind of identify these are possibly permanent breeding grounds or temporary breeding grounds all around these neighborhoods. And even though you may not be living directly right around a swamp, mosquitoes can actually fly a good distance. The wind will take them a good distance. So you don't have to be right up on the woods for them to still make your way to your neighborhood or your clubhouse. So this might be you right now. This year actually really hasn't been that as bad because it was pretty dry for a lot of the year. So unless you're closer to a swamp where there's just always mosquitoes, it may not have been as bad. But as you can see, as today is even a rainy day, things are going to get ramped up. And so we want to give you some information to help you figure out how to best keep your residents safe and comfortable, and they can help themselves. So some people discovered very recently that mosquitoes kill more people in one day than sharks have killed in 100 years. They kill more people than anything else on Earth. And yet we don't talk about them that much more. They just seem to be a nuisance, but they're much more than that. So before we get into the rest of this, I just want to make sure that, like she says, you take down any questions that you may have gotten from homeowners in the past about mosquitoes or even midges, because they can be confused a lot. And we'll try to make sure we get all your questions answered before the end of today. So without further ado, this is our agenda. We are going to give you, let's see, I guess we'll keep it. Oh, I lost my screen. All right, there you go. We are going to give you the history, some little mosquito biology. We do not expect you to go out in the field and start identifying mosquitoes. Just give you an idea of which ones are commonly going to be found around you, and then what mosquito control programs look like. And then let's talk about midges, who you may also get calls about. So in 1838, Florida's first petition for statehood was ratified. And John Randolph of Virginia warned against voting Florida to be a state because he said it would never be habitable due to swamps, alligators, and mosquitoes. And he wasn't entirely wrong. That's all that was here when they got here. And it's a perfect habitat for mosquitoes. It's very wet and very muggy and warm, and there's just water everywhere. So, he wasn't completely wrong. And what we forget sometimes is that there were so many mosquitoes, they actually named a whole county Mosquito County. So what you're looking at is an actual map of Florida from many years ago, where if you take a look at it, that's about Orange Poke, Osceola, Seminole, Flagler, Volusia, Brevard, down to about St. Lucie. All of it was Mosquito County. So imagine that they're so bad that they couldn't think of a better name of it besides Mosquito County. Like, don't even go there. They're going to carry you away. Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and Tallahassee, Pensacola were known as the malaria belt too, because that's how bad the diseases were at that time. So a lot of times people think of malaria and yellow fever as, oh, that's something for, other countries, other continents. Oh, no, it was very much being passed around here as well. As a matter of fact, back in the late 1800s, there were really bad yellow fever outbreaks, and at least 10,000 people fled Jacksonville trying to get away from there. And neighboring counties would set up roadblocks like, don't bring that over here. People in other states were meeting people at train stations with guns, like, I don't know what you have, but you take it back where you came from. Because at the time, they didn't know mosquitoes were how the yellow fever was spreading. So it wasn't until the early 1900s where they figured out the connection and was like, oh, well, we have something we can fight. That's something we can kill and hopefully stop the problem. And that's when they officially started to try to figure out how to set up a professional official mosquito control. So in 1922, they started the Florida Anti-Mosquito Association, which is now the Florida Mosquito Control Association. And then in 1925 was the first special district that was made for mosquito control in Indian River, where the residents are taxed specifically for mosquito control. So, and now there are many, many more districts across the state. Some counties just have a county program, some don't have anything at all. But it had to be official. Mosquito control we would not be able to live in Florida if they had not officially started some mosquito control practices, because people were getting sick and people were dying. So it wasn't going to last long. We have over 80 species of mosquitoes in Florida. That's a lot. The good news is we don't need to be able to identify every single one every time something bites you to be able to get rid of them and control them. So let's talk about where you find them. Still non-flowing water. So that could be retention ponds and detention ponds, freshwater ponds, and then farm or irrigation as well. And then container breeders. There are a number of mosquitoes that breed right around humans, really, because we have all the cool things like children's toys in our backyard and plant potters, and maybe you haven't cleaned your gutters in a while, so there's just leaves sitting in them. So the water isn't flowing through. Bird baths. In some cases, pools where people don't keep them covered, but they're not maintaining them, and it becomes basically like a swamp in the backyard. So anything that can hold water can breed mosquitoes, literally anything. And some of these species that hang around in those areas are Culex, that can spread West Nile virus, and the 80 species that can carry Zika, dengue, and a number of other things. So yeah, these are like your basic backyard mosquito that could be breeding right around you. Other places, tree holes. We don't think about tree holes as something that holds water, but sometimes they naturally have pockets in them. Tires. I know a lot of neighborhoods you manage, you won't see some of those things hanging around. But what you see in that left-hand corner is a bottle cap, and there is larvae swimming in that bottle cap. That's all the water they need to lay some eggs and have more mosquitoes. So again, think back to that earlier picture. I said, well, look, this whole community, how many places could be, breeding water? How many times have you seen a bottle cap laying on the ground because somebody just tossed it and think anything of it, or fell out their car? That alone can be a breeding spot for mosquitoes. So really be everywhere. So you'll never ever get rid of all the mosquitoes. The goal is to control them and minimize that population so they don't get really, really high in numbers, and then the diseases start to breed. So let's talk a little bit about the life cycle. So for those that do not know, female mosquitoes are the only ones that actually feed on us for blood to develop their eggs. The males just feed on nectar from flowers and things like that. So they feed on us, they get their blood to lay their eggs, and then when they lay them in different ways, because some of them lay in a kind of little raft formation like this, once they hatch, they'll go through several larval stages where they look exactly the same. They just get bigger and bigger. They hit a pupal stage, and then they emerge as an adult to start all over again. There are various ways to tell the difference from one type of mosquito or not. Of course, they'll expect you to do that. But the reason why it's important is because if we can tell what kind of mosquito it is, then we can know where it likely is breeding. And we'll also know what kind of diseases it does or does not spread. So we know how much of, an emergency it is that we're finding this near people. So as you can see at the top, if I identify the different kinds of eggs in the water, okay, I know what kind it is, or even how the larva is laying. But then once you get to the adult stage, some of them have stripes and scales and furs and crazy colors and stuff like that. And so again, that'll tell us, oh, this came from the swamp, or this came from somebody's yard. And so that's helpful in knowing where they should be looking to either dump some water, put larvicide in the water, or something like that. So they're permanent water breeding mosquitoes that are going to lay eggs right directly on water. It cannot get dry at all. And the eggs will typically hatch in 24 hours. Now, the crazy part is these can actually overwinter as pre-mated hibernated female mosquitoes. So have you ever felt like, wow, we haven't had mosquitoes in a while, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're out there? That's because they'd already, had, pre-mated, sat around for a while because it actually got cooler for the 7 days it gets cold at a time in winter in Florida, and then it gets warm enough, they take off and find blood, and then now I can lay my eggs. And so they were just sitting there waiting. The mosquitoes don't go away, they don't hibernate, just kind of waiting. but those have to be laid directly on water. Now, there's another kind where it has to be on a container. They will lay it where water is going to be. So that's why, again, especially in the swamps, but just even around ditches where once it gets pretty rainy, they start to fill up with water, they'll lay their eggs around those edges, and those eggs can sit. Some of those eggs sit there for months, just sitting there until water activates them. And so that's why you also will get that, oh no, there's this influx of mosquitoes and it just rained the other day. And it was just immediate. It's because there were eggs sitting around the edges of toys in people's backyards, around the gutters, around the ditches. And then all of a sudden you have rain for a good couple days that really, got filled up some water in some places. And then boom, all those eggs hatched at the same time. So these can be dry before hatching as opposed to being laid directly on water. And what do those look like in real life? Again, if you're walking around the clubhouse or something of your community, you look around, you might see these little things wiggling around in the water. We call them wigglers. That's the larvae, and that's what they look like. They'll be various sizes, but they'll be doing that in the water. So do not mistake them for tadpoles. That is not what you're seeing. And then these are called tumblers. The pupas, we call them tumblers. Well, this isn't too. That's them in real time. Look, so you have the wigglers and the pupa or tumblers in this picture. And the moment you'll see it pretty much looking like it's doing somersaults across the water. But that's what they look like in real time. Close up. And those somersaults across the water. That's what they look like.
There you go.
Sometimes you can look in a puddle or something and see a whole bunch of them. I heard sometimes they actually make a little ball of larvae, and sometimes you'll just see one or two, but either way, it's a problem. In the adult stage, obviously, like I said, they'll have stripes and spots and colors and all that kind of stuff, but it is the female mosquitoes that are feeding on us. So how far can they fly? Like, if my backyard is good, I'm good, right? No, you could have a neighbor that is supplying the mosquitoes for the rest of the neighborhood because they haven't cleaned out their gutters, because they have tires and toys and stuff in their backyard, because they have a pool that they just kind of let go by the wayside and haven't done anything with it. Oh, even better, they don't even live here the whole year. So they only do something to the pool when they come down, but the rest of the year sitting uncovered and doing whatever it wants to. They're supplying mosquitoes for the whole neighborhood and likely the next neighborhood too. So depending on the species, they can fly 5, 10, 15 miles. And again, that's another thing when we identify what type of mosquito it is, we say, oh, okay, well, this is about the radius it came from because of the type of mosquito it is. But don't get me wrong, the wind can float it a little bit too. So what are we likely to see around here? We haven't got a name for this type of mosquito yet, but we sure it's just native to Florida. So the Culex, like I mentioned, which is a vector for West Nile virus, they call them the southern house mosquito. Again, it's usually found around our homes. They like what we call kind of like a slightly a dirtier kind of water that kind of has natural things in it, like dead leaves that have disintegrated and stuff like that. So stormwater drains, or what people call catch basins sometimes, which, a neighborhood has how many? 50 to 100, more, depending on how big the neighborhood is. They're most active at night and have a pretty short flight range. So when we find those in the traps that we set, we know it came from pretty close by. Aedes aegypti, which again can breed dengue and many others. Again, found in the backyard. They do prefer darker colored containers, which is why tires are a really good place to find them sometimes. But yeah, if you have a dark toys and stuff in the backyard, they will gravitate towards those. They get in your house, they'll breed in your house. So if you have planters in your house where sometimes you water the plant and then the water kind of drains to the bottom and sits there, that's enough water for them to lay eggs in. You'll have mosquito in your house. So they can breed indoors and outdoors. That part doesn't matter. It's the water that they need.
Hey,
So
Cherie,
keep that in mind.
oh, sorry. we have a couple of questions that came in, and one of them I'm actually curious of myself. And I don't know if you know this or not, but why are some people more susceptible to mosquito bites than others? Because I can tell you, my daughter and I will get eaten by any mosquito within like a 50-mile radius, but my husband will get like nothing. So
I am the same. There's a couple, some are theories and some are a little more true than others. So, you know, you have pheromones that they say can attract people. We actually have our own body, even if it's not a true like odor. We do have our own smells and odors and things that come off of us that some people truly are just more attractive to mosquitoes because of your body chemistry. So that's part of it. So if you've had that problem your whole life, much like I have, it's never going to change. I am also
yeah.
that person where nobody else is getting bitten but me.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. There's been some theories because some have mentioned that different blood types also give off something, and I think it was either I remember if it was O positive or negative, but they said there were some studies that said people who had O blood types were more attracted to mosquitoes than others.
Yeah,
But
well,
in
I'm O
general, we
negative,
just kind of
so
give off a pheromone thing
yeah.
that is more attractive to mosquitoes than others. So you're just that lucky person that was born that way. There was nothing you did differently, no perfume that you wore differently. That's just your natural body chemistry gives off a scent that they can identify, and so they just like you better.
Fun. And then somebody also asked about the no-see-ums. So like you know, and how because they get bit by the no-see-ums and tend to have more of an allergic reaction to those.
So they are they're not in the mosquito family. Like midges are often called blind mosquitoes. They're a little closer in relation, but midges are not, unfortunately. And where the mosquitoes and the midges are breeding, like, you know, they're laying their eggs in water and stuff, midges can actually breed in like damp earth, which is why they're so hard to control. They're literally coming up off the ground. So there's nobody or any treatment that anybody can really have seen for it. Now, if you're spraying for mosquitoes, I can't remember if the rate is the same to possibly kill a flying no-see-um at the same time. But as far as larvicide, which is one of the things that we do for mosquitoes and midges, because you're treating the water so that the larva can't live, you can't do that for a midge because they're just kind of, I mean, for a no-see-um because they're kind of coming up off the ground. But again, in the body chemistry, again, is the same because I've seen people have really, really bad whelps from mosquitoes. I've seen people get bit by mosquitoes and they don't have big itchy bumps and stuff. It's like, well, why aren't you itching? So it's different. And even better, in my later years, I now will get bitten by a mosquito on Saturday. It may not itch on Sunday, but it'll start itching again on Monday or Tuesday. And it's just random. So the other thing is consider that everybody's body is different. And so your individual reaction to the mosquito bite from that same mosquito might be different than the next person just because of hormones and stuff, which is why one person is allergic to pollen while the next person isn't. So it's just different. But yeah, no-see-ums are a big problem here too. And there hasn't been anything really to control them, unfortunately. Besides, maybe managing the water on the ground. Like, you know, sometimes if it drains better, then you won't have a bunch of soggy dirt right there. So maybe it needs more soil or just better drainage that could help. But otherwise, you can't really larvicide or anything to prevent them outside of that.
And
Those
we
are
have
good questions.
one more question that came in, which is probably more of a Laura and I question. You probably could chime in too, though, Sharif. Somebody was saying there is a new community being built, you know, and there's some bodies of water there, and you know, and new lakes, and they're getting eaten alive, and who's responsible? So really, it kind of falls, Robert, in whoever, kind of like anything else with a neighborhood and association. It's whoever's kind of responsible. Now there are some, I know in my area, there's some cities, counties that will do spraying, you know, at night and things of that nature. They usually send out a notification. But if that's not being done, then it really kind of, and correct me if you guys have any more information than I do, really kind of falls on the you know, responsibility of those lakes in that area, whether it's an association or whether it's, you know, the developer or whatever it might be.
So most
Very
counties have some sort of program, and it'll consist of, we're going to put traps in these different areas of the counties. We're going to check it once a week or twice a week or whichever their program is. And then if the mosquitoes hit a certain threshold, then they will come and spray that route area that's closest to that trap. And that's it. Oh, then also most of them, because some of them, it really depends on their budget. Some of them will do larviciding. So again, this body of water is a county-owned body of water, and there's mosquitoes coming from it. They may be able to do something to treat it. There are some county programs that lean towards spraying versus the larviciding. So it's just, we find them in the trap, it hits this number, we spray. And there's some counties that are now leaning more towards, I don't want to spray as much. If there's a body of water and I can treat it for mosquitoes, then I will. But it really all depends on the particular county. And like I said, the difference there is they have mandates where they have to go by what the trap says. So if you are saying, hey, I'm getting bitten up and I don't like it, and they come out and say, well, the trap numbers don't say that there's enough for me to spray, they really can't. And say your neighborhood is closer to a swamp than maybe these others, they can't treat you any better than the next neighborhood and come around to your neighborhood extra, because it's all taxpayer money. So everybody's pretty much equal. So you can always call them first, because again, if it's their lake that's breeding it, or their pond or whatever, absolutely see if they can do something about it. Like I said, if it belongs to the community, it's a retention or a detention pond, usually that'll be on you, just like for algae and stuff like that, is yours to manage. So that I've seen some issues sometimes where there have been a community that had an issue with, say midges or something. But because the pond, I guess, belonged to the city, because there's like 4 different communities on it, neither one of them had the authority to hire somebody to do anything about it. But also most counties don't treat for midges because there's no health risk there. So there's a lot of jurisdictional issues sometimes with that. And again, if you want anything more than what the county can provide to every other county, you can't get it from them. But there's always a good place to start. But I know like Orange, Osceola, Polk, Lake, all of them have mosquito control programs. It's just of various sizes depending on what their budget is.
Mhm.
So this is just a little, I guess, a Thursday funny about mosquito control, because everybody was clapping for them. So now I'm going to talk briefly about some of the diseases that we have. Again, mosquitoes kill more people than anything else on earth, including people. Not even close. Like, and we're really good at killing people. Mosquitoes kill more people all the time, because the United States is one of the few countries where there's such formalized professional mosquito control. A lot of countries, it's just not that way. And so people are kind of left to their own devices to protect themselves. So we are very, very fortunate in that way. And the country would not have been able to survive without it. Just so you know, we do have a weekly Florida disease activity update. We partner with a I guess former professor emeritus, Dr. Day of University of Florida, and he just studies disease activity. He studies what the weather and the bird migration and all those things connect to predict what the disease activity will be within mosquitoes in a year. And so it's a free report. If you go to our website at clark.com, you can say, oh, I'd like to get that report and see what he says. You can get that report for free. So it's all of his information. We just put it into an easy formatted report to send out. So it's free to everyone. So what does this have to do with you and me? Well, mosquito-borne diseases in any part of the world can spread to any country now, because the world's gotten a lot smaller between planes and cruise ships and everything else. You can ship something and it's across the world. And then, of course, we go so many places so quickly, and we're back home in 5 days with other stuff that we brought home with us, right? And if someone gets sick, all of a sudden, nobody wants to come there, right? We saw that with Zika. It was like, oh, if you're the age that you either pregnant or you might get pregnant, don't go to Florida. And that hurt. I'm sure it hurt South Florida quite a bit. So let's talk about some of the things that you might see. You may have noticed last year there was an uptick in malaria. We hadn't seen local cases of malaria in 20 years, and all of a sudden we had 8 of them in Florida. So things were getting pretty serious for us here last year. This year, we've been good in that we've only had 27 imported cases, which means that person traveled, they picked up malaria on vacation, came back, started feeling sick, and then they were tested and they were like, oh, they have malaria. Have you been anywhere lately? Oh, yeah, I went to Cuba. Okay, cool. And so we knew they didn't get it here. Local cases were an issue because that means their neighbor 10 blocks down who didn't go anywhere now has malaria. Oh, that means there's a mosquito here that has malaria. So it's a different kind of emergency. So this year there's been 27 cases imported, but no local cases, which is good. So what does that disease cycle look like? So malaria is one of the few that doesn't come from a virus, it comes from a parasite. But that infected mosquito bites the person, it gets into their liver and kind of recreates itself, it's in their blood cells. Another mosquito bites that person, and then it's now infected, and that disease will, grow in that mosquito, and then now it can bite the next person and keep it going. So that's how the local cases start. You come from vacation with malaria, you're sitting at a cookout, you get bitten by a mosquito that then grows that disease and then starts biting somebody else later on the week. And now you have people who never left their neighborhood with malaria. And it works like that with a couple of the diseases as well. What is it like? There are different types of malaria, or rather different levels of effects you might get. Some people have fever and chills, almost kind of flu-ish, headaches and vomiting. But there are some serious ones where you can have cerebral malaria. You can have people going to comas and anemia and acute respiratory diseases and stuff like that. So how it affects a person, completely different. But again, it's not good to have. So just keep that in mind. And we're always monitoring for it, And I know Daryl will talk more about what we do to fight diseases spread by mosquitoes, but this always being monitored for, whether we've seen it in a while or not. Dengue is another one. There's actually 4 types of dengue virus. And I always tell people, oh, you got 4 chances to win, because even though you got dengue 1, you can still get 2, 3, and 4. You can never get 1 again, but you'll still be able to get the other ones. And it says usually not good if you end up getting more than 1 type, it just gets worse. While 90% of the infections are asymptomatic, which is great, for that other percentage, it can get really bad. There's some forms, there's dengue hemorrhagic fever, so we start having bleeding. There's dengue shock syndrome. So some of them are pretty bad, and then the other ones, you don't even know that you have it. You don't know which one you'll be. There are no therapeutics available. Prevention is basically don't let the virus build up in the mosquitoes, kill them as many as you can. So that's pretty much it. So this year there have been 237 imported cases. So 237 people have traveled and came back with dengue. So, but there's also been a few local cases. So this is the map, so you can see which counties that they all came from. We had 8 local ones. 6 were from Miami-Dade, 1 was from Pasco. Most recently, there was 1 in Hillsborough County. So yes, there's 8 local cases of dengue where somebody who didn't go anywhere still ended up with dengue. So that's never good. What's interesting is you may notice that you don't hear much about it in the news. It's always here. Always. Like South Florida, notorious. But generally in Florida, there's always a couple hundred cases imported, and then some cases local as well of dengue that I've seen. And the process is the same with malaria. Mosquito bites a human, another mosquito bites that same human, and then they can just keep the cycle going. Now, Eastern equine encephalitis is pretty specific one. And this one, the disease doesn't cycle through like birds or something. It cycles through horses. And these are coming from mosquitoes that breed in hardwood swamps, which Florida has. There have been no human cases of Triple E this year, but there's been 11 cases in horses. This one is pretty bad in that it has a 35% human mortality rate. That's really high for a disease. And then some people who survive get paralysis or brain damage. So it's, even if you don't die, things could still end up pretty bad. The good news is this one isn't seen so commonly. There were some pretty high numbers back in like 2018, 2019 up north, but you don't see it very often. People are always checking for it, but you don't see it very often, which is good, but it is out there. And then I include Zika, which we haven't heard much about in a while. We haven't seen any cases here in a while, any local cases. But just think, in 2015, no one even knew what it was. But by 2018, you had well over 5,000, almost 6,000 cases. And I always keep that in here just to remind people that things can change in a moment. What wasn't a problem over here could absolutely be an issue over here tomorrow. So just when we're traveling, when we're going around the world and we're going on vacations, please be careful about wearing bug spray, whether they tell you to or not. Whether they tell you, this disease is endemic, just be careful. Spray yourself so that you don't come back with more than you planned for and the other souvenirs and stuff that you bought. because you don't want to be a ground zero, the person that started spreading whatever disease across your county. So just, be careful, wear repellent and wear long sleeves when you can. And sometimes, depending on where you're traveling, they may make you get some kind of shot to prevent some specific disease. So just make sure you always do. Zika is special because the transmission routes are different than some of the other ones. There's the most that I've ever seen that you can spread. It can spread from mosquito to human, through blood transfusions, sexual transmission, from the mother to a baby, and then from human to mosquito. There's so many ways for Zika to spread. So we're really grateful that we didn't see more of it before then, and that we haven't seen really anything since. And then lastly, West Nile virus, which again, in general, in the country is always present. It was first identified in the US in 1999 because there was an outbreak in the zoo where the animals had West Nile virus. Most of the time it's flu-like symptoms or asymptomatic, so it doesn't cause a whole lot of stir, which is why you don't hear much about it at all. Crazy enough that this year so far there hadn't been any human cases, not yet. Dr. Day's most recent report said because of the weather and the way we didn't have a lot of rain, but we're starting to get it now. And we usually start seeing West Nile virus cases like in August, like people who get bitten in July will start testing positive like in August. So it's still something that we got to keep an eye out for. We just haven't seen it yet. And so I know you're wondering, with all the stuff we just talked about, mosquitoes breed everywhere, but what do we do about it? So now I'm going to pass it over to Daryl, and he can talk a little bit more about what we do about mosquitoes. Do you have control now, Daryl? There you go.
Sorry, yeah, I had to unmute myself before requesting that, so I think we're all set.
Mute me, please.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you, Sharif. And as we kind of jump into this segment now of understanding the human factor, she's gave a fantastic rundown of the importance of mosquito control, given the public health risk they pose to us and around our communities, but also, what we do about it. And as you see, where we are living is exactly where these mosquitoes are thriving at. So how do we protect communities? It's through an integrated mosquito management approach, and it starts with education. Then we move on to survey and mapping, then surveillance, larva control, and lastly, adult control. So talk a little bit more about each of these pillars now. And education, really important. Things that we're doing here today, educating the public on the importance of mosquito control. It's exactly what we do for your community in understanding what we're doing out there. It could be the types of applications we're making. We'll educate you on that. We'll educate the community on the importance of mosquito control, not just from the nuisance standpoint of you're getting bit by tens or hundreds of mosquitoes, but again, the public health risk that they pose. And education comes in many different forms. It could be handout flyers, they could be PDFs emailed to the residents and community, and then also just being active on social media. So you can find us on social media, LinkedIn quite a bit to learn a little bit more on the education of mosquito control. And once we go from education, we go into survey and mapping. And so as Sharif mentioned, we got to know where the mosquitoes are at to control them. And we have a whole GIS team here at Clark. And so what you're seeing here is where we can identify some wetland habitats that mosquitoes or midges may be breeding, some lakes, and then also mapping out the roadways and ways in which we're going to be able to get our trucks and side-by-sides down the road to make these applications to control the midges or mosquitoes. And this is another example here of a map we put together working with the town of Haverhill, where each of those little red dots indicates a storm drain system. So we talk about the human factor, and actually a lot of our day-to-day life actually breeds mosquitoes, including storm drains. Now, of course, Florida needs a way to manage our water because we're so flat, and we always need to make sure that it's kind of getting pushed out to the coast. So within these storm drains, we typically find a lot of mosquito breeding going on, and it's important for us to identify them. So we map that out and then we treat accordingly. So just a little humor here. Again, it's important to know where they are, and we have to go find them to kill them. So now talking about the surveillance portion of an integrated mosquito management approach, what you're seeing here in the upper left corner is what we call a CDC light trap. And it looks a little thrown together, and kind of was when it originally designed, but it actually works really well. What you're seeing in that blue cooler there is where we actually store dry ice. And so as dry ice melts, it releases as a gas, and that gas is CO2. And so you can see there's a light source there. So mosquitoes are attracted to light and CO2, which makes this trap perfect for capturing adult mosquitoes. So we hang it in a tree. We have a battery that has a fan in there. And as the CO2 is releasing, the light's being attracted, mosquitoes gravitate towards this area and then get sucked into the fan, which brings them down into that catch bag. And we set these traps for about 24 hours. And then after that, we collect the catch bag, we take it back to our office, and we analyze it in our lab, which is what you see in the bottom left corner there. A bunch of mosquitoes we put out on a petri dish, and we sort them by males and females. So it's important to know if you're having a lot of mosquitoes out there that are biting or not, which type of species they are. As Sharif mentioned, the disease threat could vary depending on the disease or depending on the mosquito species. And then also just overall abundance of your adult mosquito population out there. Are you having 3 to 5 mosquitoes, or are you having 3 to 500 or thousands mosquitoes? So surveillance is a crucial part to understanding what the threat level in your community might be. And even before we get to adults, we could also do larval surveillance, which is what you see in the image there to the right, where we have a tool called a dipstick. And essentially it's a little cup at the end of a stick where we're able to dip some water and try to catch those mosquito larvae and or pupa to identify if we're finding breeding in any of these habitats. So once we do identify some mosquito larvae and or just mosquito breeding habitat that could be conducive, we could go ahead and start making some applications. And so what that looks like is using anything from a tablet to a granular product to make sure that we're putting these products in the areas in which we're finding mosquito breeding and targeting the mosquito in that larval stage before they become the bloodsuckers we know them to be. So larviciding is a great way to start reducing that overall mosquito population in your community, first off, before you even start feeling the presence of the mosquitoes. Then lastly, here we got adult control as part of an integrated mosquito management program. And this is kind of what people think of when they think mosquito control, right? You think of the truck with the flashing light driving down the street and you see the fog machine coming out behind. Well, that's a form of adult control. And just as it entails, we're targeting the adult mosquitoes only. And the way in which this works is we have an ultra low volume product, ULV machine that applies product at very small droplets so that those droplets stay afloat in the air, enough time for mosquitoes to fly into that cloud and come in contact with the product, which will lead then to mortality of that mosquito. Now, it's important to make these applications at the right times of day to make sure that you're not having any non-target impacts. So when bees and butterflies are less active during the evening hours, is oftentimes when mosquitoes are most active, which is perfect because that's what we're targeting. We're targeting the mosquitoes, and this is when you use that form of application. We also have barrier applications as well. So this is what you might see going around individual homeowners, homes, and or clubhouses. And what we're doing here is we're targeting where the mosquitoes are harboring. So mosquitoes are kind of like humans sometimes. We like to rest when it's too hot outside. We try to find the shade. And so that's where shrubs are a perfect area for mosquitoes or midges to go and relax in. So a product and application of barrier treatments is when you actually apply it to foliage and shrubs where you know the mosquitoes or midges are resting. And it has a residual effect to where it could land on that leaflet. So when the mosquito or midge comes and rests on that leaf, it could pick up enough of that active ingredient to then lead to a mortality. Here at Clark, we have GPS tracking in our vehicles and on our equipment. So as we're driving around your community, we're making sure that exactly what we mapped out earlier in our mapping portion of an integrated mosquito management approach, our trucks are following that same exact route to make sure that we're treating the areas that we need to be treating. And we could use your help also. So residents, as Sharif mentioned, oftentimes there's a lot of mosquito breeding going on just in people's own backyards. So emptying bird baths, pots, any bit of standing water that could be around your home, changing out your gutters and clean that up. Also, just any depressions in your turf or areas around your home that you could fix up really helps reduce the overall mosquito and or midge population around your community. Now there's tons of different resources available to you. Clark has a lot of educational material we could provide you and your community, but then there's also information from Department of Health, Florida Department of Agriculture, Consumer Services, the Center for Disease Control, CDC. So there's a lot of governmental agencies as well that have fantastic resources for you to share with your residents. And this is an example from Department of Health here in a video.
Mosquitoes will bite day and night, so protect yourself with these tips. Keep mosquitoes outside by shutting doors and covering windows with screens. Use EPA-approved insect repellents anytime you're outdoors. Cover your skin with long sleeves and pants. Mosquitoes lay their eggs in water. Just a bottle cap of water is all they need. So drain, refresh, or cover anything around buildings that can hold water at least weekly and put away outside items that aren't being used. A message from the Florida Department of Health.
Excellent.
Mosquitoes will bite day and
All right. And so Sharif gave fantastic examples of scenarios as to where mosquitoes could breed. I actually have a lot of real world experience here that I'd like to share with you. A couple videos that I've taken. So I'll play the video, then give you a little background context to it. You can see the mosquito larva right there. These little wigglers. Yes, so right in front of a community there, the residents were complaining on a monthly basis when they were going for their board meetings that they were getting bit by mosquitoes. And so I went, did an inspection around their clubhouse area. And sure enough, this beautiful plant that aesthetically is pleasing is also breeding a lot of mosquitoes and was a problem for them as well. So as you see, you zoom out and it looks like nothing out of the ordinary, just another beautiful clubhouse, yet it was breeding a lot of mosquitoes. So that's just an example as to where we could find some of these mosquitoes in a real world scenario. And then here's another one. Try to pay close attention and I'll try to identify it with the little cursor, but you could see some mosquito larvae right there kind of just getting flushed down right there. And when I move this leaf, you'll see a lot. What this was is I was walking around my community and noticed the sprinkler system has been leaking for a couple days. And you can see it was a very slow leak into the storm drain and they had it flagged off. So clearly the community knew that they needed to work on it. But when I was looking at it, even with that little bit of flow, there were still mosquito larvae in that system. And in some areas where the water slowed down enough behind that leaf, there was probably about 20 to 40 mosquito larvae in just that little segment. So you can see it doesn't take a lot of water to breed mosquitoes. And you could only imagine how many mosquitoes were coming off of that storm drain where that water was ending up. So again, those are real world scenarios around communities where we found mosquitoes breeding. So enough about mosquitoes, and I'm sure if you have any more questions regarding mosquitoes, we'll get to them at the end here. But we're going to talk about midges to round out this webinar. And I hope this isn't a photo that's familiar to you. However, if you do live on a stormwater pond, unfortunately, it might be. And so those are midges up there. And we're talking about the aquatic midges. So, you know, there's over 2,000 different species of midges. And in North America, we have over, in North America and in Florida alone, we have over 300. So there's a lot. But today we're going to be talking about non-biting aquatic midges that are both edgewater and phantom midges. So we'll get into a little bit as to what that means. So the edge midge life cycle. These are going to be midges that live in your littoral shelf, in your shallower areas of your stormwater pond. And very similar to the mosquito life cycle, the midge life cycle is the female lays the eggs in the water. The eggs hatch into the larval stage, and then they come into the pupa stage before hatching out of the water as adults. But one thing that's definitely a little bit more unique about the midge compared to the mosquito in the life cycle of the larval stage is that the midge larva oftentimes like to be buried in the sediment, whereas the mosquito larva is up there at the surface of the water. The midge larva likes to be buried in the sediment. It does really well in those types of anoxic environments where there's not a lot of oxygen. And midges are very challenging to determine when they're going to be hatching off. Mosquitoes are pretty regular in understanding if they got water, they got warm weather, and they got some nutrients in their water system, they could hatch off within just a couple days. Whereas midges could actually stay in the larval stage up to a couple weeks. So it's really challenging to identify when midges are going to be hatching off, and it's very much environmentally driven. So it could be lower water levels, it could be temperature change in the water column, it could be how much light they're exposed to, atmospheric temperatures. There's a lot of different variables as to what might lead to a midge hatch off. And so the edge midges, they're oftentimes this red color. So if you go to the edge of your stormwater pond and take a little bit of a sample, you could see the midge larva looking in this reddish color. And then they hatch off as adults. They're a little bit greenish, kind of smaller, light tan, and have very much brushy antennas. Now, again, these do not bite, but they do hatch off in the form of thousands, and so they become a huge nuisance. So those are the edge midges. Now the phantom midges, very similar in their life cycle, like to live down the sediment, and the phantom midges like to be more so in the center of your lake. So definitely in your deeper areas of your stormwater pond is where you're going to find your phantom midges. And what's unique about these is, whereas the edge midge in the larval stage is a filter feeder, taking up a lot of nutrients, these actually feed on active organisms. And so they take nutrients from the stormwater pond, but also will feed on smaller organisms as well. So some problems with them, you know, clearly just a huge nuisance. When they die off in large numbers, they can also leave a little bit of a fishy odor to them. If you have allergies or asthma, sometimes they could enhance that type of irritant. So definitely something you want to manage around your community. And this is an example. Actually, I was Googling this of, you know, scenarios of midge issues. This is back in the World Series of 2007, where they had to actually stop play in the 8th inning because the midges were so bad and tried to spray each other down. Now, again, don't know where these midges were coming from. They're actually not really strong flyers. But if they got a very strong wind and they're attracted to light, I'd imagine there was a a lot of lights going on for a World Series game here that the midges were attracted to and just moving towards. So unfortunately, looking at an image like this, things I'd like to call out within these developments and how communities are being built these days, it's fantastic to have waterfront property. I'm an avid fisherman, so I'd love to just walk out my backyard and cast a line. That'd be great. However, you do see that there aren't many littoral plants in your stormwater pond here. There's not a lot of shrubbery or fence or anything else. So when these midges do hatch off, there is nowhere else for them to go other than directly to your home. And as I mentioned, midges are not very strong flyers, so they're going to try to find a resting area very quickly. They are attracted to light, and they also like resting up on these screens because they're easy to hold on to. Oftentimes they're maybe out of the sun and maybe up in a little bit more shaded area, so it's more comfortable for them to be there. So we could provide surveillance where we go out there and actually dip the sediment of the stormwater pond to see if we could find those larvae, and or very similar to what we do for the adult mosquitoes of setting a trap, we could set traps to identify adult midges as well. And so these are some examples of us collecting some sediment and looking at that. Now the control efforts for midges, again, it's very challenging. Both midges and mosquitoes. It's not an eradication program. It's just trying to control the problem. But we could target the midges in the larval stage, treating the stormwater ponds where we identified the larval at. And those treatments are to be recurred on more of a monthly basis because it's so challenging to really know when those midges are going to be hatching off. So you want to have that concentration of product in there to make sure that you're targeting that midge larva. But then if the midges do hatch off, it's important to do adulticide treatments as well to reduce the female from laying the eggs and starting up a next generation of midge population within your community, and or barrier applications as well. So both ATV, UOV treatments around the pond and or barrier treatments are excellent ways to try to reduce the number of midges around your community. And so, it's important to know ponds don't need to be murky to have a lot of nutrients and to breed midges. You can have a really beautiful looking stormwater pond with fountains, vegetation, fisheries, and you could still have midges. They are a native species, so it's very challenging to control them. With that being said, things like aeration, fish stocking do help try to reduce the overall number of midges, but it's an integrated approach along with other control efforts like larviciding and adulticiding. So a few things, trying to reduce your fertilizer runoff and nutrient load into the stormwater pond. Try to reduce the light sources around your pond as well, or around your home, because like I said, when they hatch off during the nighttime, they're going directly towards a light source. So there's a few things you could do around your home to try to reduce those midges. So the last couple slides here, we just want to talk about how this economically might work for you and your community. An example here, what we put together, community of around 4.5 miles or so with a couple of storm drains. If each individual resident wanted to take on a form of mosquito control themselves, they're paying their own pest control company maybe $33 a month to go do mosquito control for just their home. And so that's money out of the individual homeowner's pocket, aside from the association fees that they pay. And you're only treating your own home. As Sharif mentioned, sometimes it could be your neighbor or two neighbors down that could be having the mosquito problem. So you're not really taking care of the source. Whereas you contract out with Clark and we could go around and help treat your whole community to try to reduce that overall mosquito population around your common areas, and also helping you around your individual homes at a lower price point than if each individual homeowner was trying to just pay for their own mosquito control services on their own. So what could you do, and some helpful tips to allocate for a midge or mosquito control program if you don't have a budgeted line item right now, is to simply just put like $1 into midge or mosquito services outside of your vegetation management, outside of your pest control company or your landscape company. And I understand once it's a line item, it's probably a little bit easier to get funding down the road for the future years and or also into moving money on different line items. So with that, I will leave our contact information up here, and I really appreciate everyone's time this morning.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. And we can go through, let's see, we kind of held some of these questions. Some of them you guys may have already touched on. Somebody asked, how do you protect yourself from mosquitoes? So I think the most common is, using sprays depending on where you're at, and if you're just sitting out on your patio or if you're like out hiking or something of that nature. I don't know if you guys have any, specific recommendations that you find that work the best.
Yeah, like mentioned, using approved repellents, being aware of when you're going outside during those evening hours. If you could do some of your work or walks a little bit before that when the mosquitoes aren't as active, that could help. And then wearing long arms, long legs. It's South Florida, so you're going to sweat regardless. If you sweat a little bit more to protect yourself, it might be worth it this time of year.
Okay. Somebody asked, do female mosquitoes bite and then die, or are they capable of biting many times?
Yeah, so the female is capable of biting several times. And so and again, it's important to note that mosquitoes don't just bite humans. They're biting birds, they're biting mammals, they're biting anywhere they could get a blood source. But yeah, the female mosquitoes do bite multiple times.
Okay. And then Bruno had brought up a couple of times about the fish. So, you mentioned fish. I know somebody, I don't know if it was Bruno, but somebody had mentioned earlier in I think it was Miami-Dade County, that the county provides like fish, or they'll even come out. I think I remember, I'm in Hillsborough County. I think I remember the past couple of summers, you'll see from the county some signs that are put out where you can come get fish, and
Yep.
And things of that, special fish, special species that eat the mosquitoes and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of programs do offer free mosquito fish. And exactly as the fish implies, areas that are able to support life for those fish and where we find mosquito breeding going on, they will stock those areas. And yeah, that's a form of biological control that is environmentally friendly, complete support of it. And if your programs around your community offer it, by all means, please stock with fish. It's great.
And how did you treat the mosquitoes in those imperial bromeliads? We're about to install some in the community. Is there? Oh, Sherry's saying no.
Don't do it. But really, yeah, with bromeliads, the problem is once it's there, it's a permanent source. Like a toy in the backyard, or we recommend that at least once a week you go back and tip and toss anything that's holding water. You can't tip and toss that plant once it's in the ground. And so the best recommendation we've given is that you can rinse it out, because it may not, if it's dry, well, it's dry. But if it has been raining, that you go through, like take a water hose or something and kind of rinse it out, because the larva can't survive once it's dry. So if you sprayed out all the water that was in that, including the larvae, they're now on the ground, they're going to die. The problem is there's still now water in the bromeliad. So it's going to be an ongoing cycle of, let me check these on a regular basis, rinse out the water that's already in it, and then I'll just have to come back and do that on a regular basis, because you can't tip it over. And, like a trash can or something like that is going to continuously hold water as long as it's raining. So our recommendation for most people, like, don't put them there. Find a different plant.
Is that the plant that Daryl showed that had the water? Okay.
We've seen communities or resorts, people who are in the pool are complaining of getting bitten up. And then you walk around the hotel and there are bromeliads lining around the entire thing. It's like, well, I mean, they're there. The mosquitoes are breeding right next to your pool. Or I've seen communities where you turn into the neighborhood and right after the sign, there's a line of bromeliads down the median. And it's like, you can't. So with a lot of them, they spend a lot of money to get those plants there. So if you haven't put them there yet, advice is just not to pick a different plant if you can, because once they're there, you can't get rid of them.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, guys, thank you so much. For everybody who's still on, Laura and I will send out an email to everybody who has registered for this, and we will connect a link to the video. We did record this, so we will provide you with a link to the recording, as well as some additional little attachments that Sharif and Daryl have provided us with information. And then we'll give you their information as well. I know they had it on the screen here, but we'll put it in the email as well, so it's easy for everybody to access. So if you guys want to reach out to them about their services or have any other questions, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we thank everybody for joining us today. Oh, we had a few more. Let's see. We had a few people. Shali, thank you. Sharif and Daryl, excellent presentation. Thank you. Very informative. Somebody did have one last question. Would this be a clever strategy to kill larvae? Spray water on flat surfaces, i.e. parking lot, sidewalks, sprinklers, and let the sun dry the water, which would allow larvae to become activated but then die before they mature?
You never want to add water.
Okay.
Because again, you say you spray the parking lot, depending on how it's made, the water has to go someplace. It's going to drain down, it's going to run into a drain, it's going to run into some little pocket. It could be sitting in leaves. So I've heard of someone who put buckets out in his yard to put larvicide in the buckets. So when the mosquitoes came, they laid the eggs and they died. I was like, but you gave them a habitat though. So it was like you brought the water to them. So you never want to bring the water to the mosquitoes.
Okay.
You
Perfect.
want to keep the water away from the mosquitoes.
All right.
It was
Well, thank you
interesting.
guys so much. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to doing this with you guys every year because I know it's very informative. So
Great job.
yeah, thank you. And thank you for everybody who joined us. And we hope to see you all again soon. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.